All right, Bulls and Bears, we're back with another dose. BX4 News back in the building. Let's go ahead and get right into it, folks. A lot to get into today. Economic, financial news, where you should be invested, where I'm invested. The correction in the stock market. This week, we're now in correction territory with 10% price declines now in several indices, and we'll see how it plays out through Friday and the rest of the week. But the pain is continuing, the bleeding is continuing in the stock market with the same fears as what they're saying. The fears are the tariffs and the economic slowdown because of the tariffs and the consumer getting pummeled with even higher prices. That's what they're saying is the reason that stocks are selling off. Now remember, it's the elites, it's the billionaires, it's the hedge funds, the investment corporations, investment companies. They're the ones that are selling off the stocks because remember, most of the stocks, over 90% of the stocks are owned by the top 10%. So if they wanted to bring the market back up, they could come in, hit the buy button, and bring it right back up. So they obviously want there to be a sell-off, and that's what's happening. Their reasoning is because of the tariffs. So that's kind of laying out what we're seeing here in the stock market. But take a look at what Bank of America had to say today. This is pretty, I think, eye-opening for Bank of America to say this. Basically, Bank of America is coming out. And they're saying this entire thing has been a scam, right? They didn't use those words, but pretty much that's what they're pointing out. This entire illusion of economic growth, or what's been looked at or noted as economic growth, has been a scam mostly on the back of federal spending. And this is Bank of America's Research Investment Committee head Jared Woodward. He wrote that the U.S. has never been more government dependent. It relies on government for 85% of job growth and 33% of all spending. In other words, if it weren't for the borrowed money that you can, basically it's an open-ended credit card that the country has. If it wasn't for that open-ended credit card with the unlimited borrowing possibilities or capabilities, there would have not been any economic growth, folks. 85% of job growth was dependent on this spending or borrowing. 33% of all spending, and worst of all, close to 7% budget deficits, all of which are at record highs. Yes, we agree. All of that has been written about for years. We've been talking about it for years. But it's interesting the Bank of America has actually basically come out and admitting this whole thing has been a scam based on unlimited borrowing capability. And you might want to ask yourself, if it wasn't for the 30-something trillion dollars in debt that we've ran up as a country, how many years would we have had negative GDP? Right? Probably most of the years over the past many, many decades since the 70s, since we came off that gold standard in the early 70s, folks. So entire thing's been a scam. People are waking up. Bank of America knows it. You know it. I know it. And I think it's starting to spread a little bit. I mean, the general person just waking up, going to work, trying to pay their bills, they don't even research this kind of stuff. Most people are watching dog videos, comedy videos, bloopers, people tripping and falling. That's what most people, I think, are doing online. There are a few people, though, that are waking up. I think it's getting to be a bigger percentage of the population with channels like mine and others. Of course, a lot bigger channels out there than mine. But I think a bigger portion of the population is starting to wake up and see what's going on. So I guess that would be kind of the silver lining right now with what we're seeing with this outrageous cost of living and people buried under so much debt. But back to this Bank of America analytics here. They came out and said, quote, economic growth has been enabled by unsustainable government support and protectionist policies, unquote. So you have a lot of people out there saying, yes, this is the entire backbone of the economy. It's the spending. And some people are for the cuts, right? We're seeing massive cuts in spending, of course, job cuts, agencies being axed, gotten rid of. We have people that are for that. They say, just like Bank of America is saying, it's unsustainable. So at some point, there had to be, whatever you want to call it, the tough love or the hard decision to finally make these cuts, to cut the spending. Other people say, if it's an open-ended credit card, let's just continue to borrow to infinity and everything will be fine. Well, everything's not fine. Because the more you borrow, the more money you throw at the problem, the more fuel you put on the fire, the worse it gets. The fire gets bigger. Inflation's already running hot. And you want the fire to get bigger and inflation to run even more hot. You need a correction. And this could be the catalyst for the correction. We're already in a stock market correction, right? A lot of people are losing their retirement, or at least part of it, with the downturn in the stock market, right? I've been more defensive here lately over the past few months. We all saw the writing on the wall. We saw the new administration had a lot of plans, and they're carrying out what they said they were going to do, and it's going to get even crazier going forward. So I'm continuing to be defensive, continuing to be cautious. Once we hit some sort of bottom, and who knows where the exact bottom is, nobody knows, that's when I'm going to come in. I'm going to start buying more stocks, start loading up the portfolio a little bit, but it's long overdue, folks. I mean, we've needed a correction for many, many years. I mean, since 2008, we haven't had a major correction. 2020, that was a brief correction. If you look at the markets, the housing market, they didn't allow that to come down. They put a floor under it. Automobile prices, repossessions got canceled, remember? So they put a floor under auto prices, and they cut interest rates. Now they're back up. But for years, we had rock bottom interest rates. Easy money, loose lending policies are still in place. The emergency programs out of the banks are still in place ever since 2020, where banks don't have to have any money. They can still make out loans, even without any money, folks. So this is a game changer. This is finally, I think, a fork in the road, and we're going to see maybe a different trajectory, a different path. Many people say this is going to make things even worse, though, with more inflation, right? Pretty much all the news outlets are saying this is going to be massively inflationary, right? There's a few people that disagree. They think the job growth is going to make up for the overall rising cost, right? So we're going to see how it plays out. But at least Bank of America, I mean, what do you think about this? Bank of America pretty much saying this whole thing's a scam. That's what I got. Now, something that's pretty interesting to a lot of people is this. We have a judge basically has ordered to reinstate tens of thousands of federal workers because of the mass firings, what they're calling a sham. The question that a lot of people have, some people say, yeah, this is good. These people got their jobs back. Other people are saying, what's the point of even having someone come in and make these decisions if a judge is just going to reverse it, right? So the administration is thinking these things are going to help, but a judge has reversed that. So what's the point of having a president if the judge is just going to override it? So why doesn't the judge just make all the decisions? If the judge is the final say, why doesn't the judge just be the president and just make all the decisions, run the economy, so to speak, right? That's what people are asking, and I can kind of see why they're asking that question. I mean, if a judge is just going to override it, why not just have the judge come in and run things if that's the ultimate decision maker, if that's the decider? And then the judge, why are they saying that some jobs are not to be cut or should not have been cut, but others are? So then now you've got the judge picking, okay, this job's essential, that job's essential. You can't fire these workers, you can fire them. So it's crazy. It's a mess, folks. This is going to be a huge, a hot mess. Not just a mess, but a hot mess. And you got people protesting. We've got people torching Teslas. A lot of Teslas got vandalized, torched. A lot of dealerships are getting torched and vandalized. And a lot of crazy news reports here. More shots fired at Oregon Tesla dealership and ongoing vandalism. With all the audits and everything, all the cuts happening right now, they're basically blaming Elon for all this. Backlash, protests against Musk. There was some a few days ago as well. Tesla dealership damage, pretty extensive. Protest breakout at Tesla showroom. That was 3 days ago. Tesla vehicles vandalized across the U.S. Right, so it's a lot. This just came out in the last 24 hours. And they're pretty much saying in every state across the U.S., there's been some either protests or vandalism or both as a backlash or as a protest against what's happening right now with all these changes and cuts and everything else. So I don't know, folks. I mean, we want to see some changes. We know that this is unsustainable, just like Bank of America said. But then when changes are finally implemented, there's all this backlash and people want things to go back to the way it was, even though the way it was unsustainable. Imagine if you had an open-ended credit card and you went out and just spent like crazy. You ran up as much debt as you maxed out all your credit cards. Imagine if you did that as a person. You would look pretty good. You would look like you're doing pretty good. You'd probably have the nicest clothes, the nicest cars, the nicest house, take the coolest vacations. Everyone watching you would think you're hitting home runs, right? You're doing something. You're balling. They think you're a baller or a good investor, whatever. people would think you're doing well. That's the United States, folks. The United States has looked really, really good. We've been called the world's richest nation, but we're really the world's largest debtor nation, right? And I've said this for years now, that this is an illusion, folks. The world's richest nation is what we're looked at across the country, or across the world, pretty much. The world's largest economy, but it's propped up, or it's made possible by endless borrowing endless amounts of money. So are we really the strongest economy if it's just borrowed money? Are you the wealthiest person if you go out and max out all your credit cards? But it's even worse, because in this case, you probably have a debt limit or a credit card limit. The U.S. doesn't have that. It's open-ended. So, of course, they're going to have this debt ceiling argument every, 8 months, at least every year. And they always increase the debt limit. So it's not really a limit. If it's always going to be increased, it's not a limit. It's open-ended. It's endless debt, folks. That's what it is. And that's what made the U.S. look so good. And it's given us a nice standard of living, right? We still have a lot of homeless people, but the people that are under a roof, not homeless, they're doing pretty well. Not too many starving people in this country. Even though people have to run up their credit cards to get food, they still have credit cards to be able to survive. So as long as the credit card never runs out, I guess you can argue, let's just keep it the way it is forever. But if we don't have enough production and manufacturing to make up for all the purchases, to make up for all the consumption, then you're just going to see higher prices to infinity. And it's got to change sometimes, folks. So I'm on the side of, yeah, we need to make changes. They're difficult to see. They're causing a lot of chaos. There's going to be chaos no matter what, folks. There's no avoiding chaos with the amount of decadence, with the amount of foolishness, and with the amount of uncontrolled, unlimited spending that we've seen in this country. All right, and we've heard for years how the central bank, they were going to steer us into a soft landing. Remember that? It's going to be a soft landing. It's going to be a soft landing because first they raise rates and they cut rates a little bit, and they're going to guide us into this soft landing, and it's going to be, no turbulence. There's not going to be no such thing, folks. There's going to be turbulence. Maybe it won't be you directly, but millions of people now are being affected with what we're seeing. And the dominoes haven't even started to fall yet, folks. When you have this many people lose their jobs at once, the millions of people, I should say, unless a judge comes in and reverses all this. But normally when you have millions of people lose their jobs, you're going to see big fallout in the economy, a ripple effect, a snowball effect, if you will, dominoes falling. They started and they're going to continue, right? Unless they stop this whole thing, unless somebody comes in and says, sorry, I can't do this, right? Then what's the point? What's the point of all this, right? Anyway, I rambled a little bit. Let's get into some other news here, folks. All right, some of this stuff gets on my nerves a little bit here. I like talking about it, but just the way things are being handled right now, or the way things are being perceived, is kind of annoying. But look at this. Many Americans say that the actions taken right now out of the current administration are too erratic. And that was a Reuters poll. Well, how many is many? It says many Americans. A majority of Americans believe the current administration is being too erratic. Some 57% of respondents, including both sides of the political aisle, these policies have been unsteady, and they don't believe the tariffs are going to work. I've said here, I think the tariffs are going to work. They're going to work towards higher prices. But even the president came out and said, yes, there's going to be some economic pain before we see relief. The question is, when does the relief start? And then is it going to be 4 years? Is it going to be done? And then there's going to be a new administration that comes in and changes everything back. That's likely a possibility. And then also we have to keep on bringing this up here. Why would companies want to bring jobs back to the U.S. if they know that everything we're seeing, all these tariffs, could just be reversed in a few years with new leadership? If you ran a company, would you bank on open up manufacturing in the U.S. if you don't know what's going to happen in a few years? Maybe the tariffs will be gone, right? It's crazy. But shoppers are pulling back because of the turmoil and because the credit cards are already so loaded up. We're at $1.3 something trillion in credit card debt. Wall Street Journal, shoppers are skimping on cigarettes, Doritos, and Twinkies. Folks, you should skimp on those. You should skip those completely, even if you have no debt. Skip on those completely. U.S. convenience store sales fell 4.3% by volume in the year ended February 2023. The reason they put by volume is because if you put it in dollars, it's still increased because things cost so much more. But in volume, like how many units are selling, so to speak, how many items, down 4.3%. Pretty interesting. And it continues here. Americans are stopping for gas, but they aren't grabbing the snacks or the smokes. So people are struggling, I think, just to fill up their gas tanks. And they're probably seeing their credit cards close to being maxed out. Not all, but a lot. With just filling up the gas tank, which is still pretty high. Continues here out of the journal. Circle K store in suburban Chicago. Adult customers with children now with them hurry out of the door before they get talked into buying snacks. That's what they said at the store there. And actually, that reminds me of my daughter. She's 11, and she begs and begs and begs for junk food. Every time we go to the grocery store, she's always grabbing snacks, and she begs and begs and begs. And I had to actually tell her, not just no, but after one no, I had to warn her, no more begging. One no is all it should take, right? If you're a salesperson, it's good to be persistent, but if you're bugging your parents, just stop after the first no. That's what I'm trying to get my kids to learn, basically. All right, but back to the current leadership and what they're saying. Basically, Trump's coming out and saying this is a big bet, and it's quoted here, Americans will tolerate, and this looks like a paraphrase of what he said, Americans will tolerate economic downturn to restore manufacturing. I don't think Americans are going to be that forward-looking enough to say, yeah, it's worth it. I'm broke. These cuts are good, but it's going to be better down the road. I don't think Americans are going to be looking at that, and I don't think it's going to really bring that much manufacturing back. We'll have to see how it plays out. And my thoughts at the end of the day, folks, I think a lot of this is political theater. It's to put one side versus the other, to cause more chaos, to cause more division, and that way you don't see the big picture, what's going on. If they really wanted to make things more affordable, it would be very simple. Stop institutions from buying homes. The housing market would come crashing down. Just that one simple step, stroke of a pen, unless the judge overrides it, but a stroke of a pen, you could have this whole thing corrected. But that would implode the rest of the economy. As housing goes, the rest of the economy goes. So they're not going to do that. They're probably going to keep the housing bubble inflated. They're still keeping the emergency measures on the banks right now, so banks can keep loaning out money, even though banks technically would be insolvent right now if you didn't have those emergency measures. Think about that. The banks would be insolvent if it weren't for the emergency measures that we implemented a few years ago, folks. Crazy, insane, but this is what's happening, folks. Make sure you're glued to this channel. Please make sure you subscribe button right there. Help keep this channel alive. If you like what we talk about, hit that like button as well. And we'll see everybody very soon. Read your comments down below this one. Talk to you soon. Peace.